At home, more than 40 suspected gang members and associates are in jail tonight. ABC Action News reporter Rebecca.
The smiling delivery driver dropping packages at your door was part of a criminal network. That chilling question became reality for hundreds of Florida families in late September 2025 when Operation Genesis, an Immigration and Customs Enforcement (ICE) campaign, uncovered the largest organized infiltration in state history. Overnight, the Sunshine State's calm suburban streets turned into a battleground of deception and discovery. Precision stunned analysts worldwide. It wasn't just a law enforcement success, it was a revelation. The operation exposed an uncomfortable truth. America's greatest threat might not be crossing its borders, but already living within them. As Florida's families watched ICE convoys roll through their once peaceful neighborhoods, one question hung heavy in the humid air. How long had the danger been waving from the other side of the street? Beneath the surface of Florida's quiet neighborhoods lay a system as intricate as any corporate enterprise, and just as disciplined. The 400 individuals captured in Operation Genesis weren't scattered offenders. They were organized operatives, following a structure borrowed directly from cartel playbooks. Intelligence reviewed by The Guardian and DW News revealed a network divided into specialized units: infiltration, logistics, communications, and finance. Every member had a role, every movement a purpose. Some embedded themselves into communities by taking jobs that guaranteed access and trust. School custodians, repairmen, delivery drivers, even community volunteers. Others ran shell businesses that laundered money through restaurant chains, car washes, and home maintenance services. Reuters found evidence that several suspects owned limited liability companies used to route funds to crypto wallets in Mexico and Honduras. From there, the money vanished into cartel-controlled digital exchanges. The infiltration wasn't just financial, it was informational. Defense News reported that the Florida network operated on encrypted messaging platforms and, in some cases, multiplayer gaming servers, where coded phrases replaced traditional signals. Using drones and dash cams, they tracked patrol schedules and law enforcement routes. In one particularly chilling case, ICE found aerial footage of an elementary school and police substation in Osceola County. Evidence of reconnaissance missions disguised as delivery routes. ABC News analysts described the coordination as criminal hybrid warfare. These weren't gangs reacting to opportunity, they were strategists executing pre-planned logistics cycles. The organization used compartmentalization to protect its hierarchy. No member knew more than 3 others directly, a tactic perfected by transnational intelligence networks. That discipline allowed the system to thrive undetected for years. Federal data revealed a pattern of calculated movement. Offenders frequently relocated between counties, altering aliases, shifting jobs, and re-establishing local credibility before restarting operations. This mobility exploited America's fragmented jurisdictional system, where county databases often failed to communicate. According to DW, what one sheriff's office saw as a minor misdemeanor, ICE identified as part of a larger criminal mosaic. Network's origins remain under investigation, but early findings suggest ties to Mexican and Venezuelan cartel branches experimenting with domestic embedding, the deliberate placement of operatives inside U.S. infrastructure to create stable logistical corridors. Jane's Defense Weekly likened the structure to civilian camouflage doctrine, where operatives blend into daily life to sustain illicit operations indefinitely. What alarmed Homeland Security most wasn't the violence, it was the patience. These individuals didn't act impulsively. They invested years into becoming invisible. Al Jazeera English reported that some suspects had lived in Florida for over a decade, marrying, paying taxes, and building reputations as model workers. Their true allegiance was only revealed through encrypted chat intercepts recovered during the raids. Implications were staggering. President Donald Trump's administration reclassified such infiltration as a national security threat rather than an immigration issue. The DHS issued an urgent memo redefining domestic illegal networks as internal asymmetric entities, a label previously reserved for terrorism and espionage. According to Reuters and the Miami Herald, the 7-day crackdown, internally codenamed Tidal Wave, resulted in 400 arrests. The suspects weren't ordinary migrants. Many carried histories of sexual assault, narcotics distribution, and violent crime. For years, they had blended seamlessly into local communities, taking jobs in maintenance, delivery, and home repair. They waved to neighbors, attended church, and sent their kids to the same schools as everyone else. But behind that familiarity was coordination, a network operating more like a cartel than a collection of fugitives. The revelation carried deeper strategic meaning. As The Guardian observed, America's borders no longer end at its coasts. They begin at every neighborhood street. The war once fought on the periphery had come home. This shift exposed uncomfortable realities about the 21st century threat landscape. Technology, globalization, and migration had converged to create hybrid networks, part criminal, part corporate, part clandestine. And the Florida case was only the first visible fracture in a far wider system. Experts now fear that other U.S. states, less monitored than Florida, may already harbor similar embedded networks. The question facing Washington was no longer how they got in, but how many are already here. Blueprints of infiltration had been decoded. But could America adapt fast enough to prevent the next one? It was still dark when the first teams rolled out. Unmarked vans drifted silently through Florida's suburbs, their headlights dimmed, their radios encrypted. At precisely 4:30 a.m. on September 22, 2025, the command went live. Operation Genesis, the largest ICE-led domestic enforcement action in modern history, had begun. Tallahassee's DHS Fusion Center, agents monitored live drone feeds streaming over 3 counties. Digital maps glowed with red markers, each representing a confirmed target. In total, more than 700 federal officers, National Guard soldiers, and local deputies stood ready. Their mission: dismantle the network before dawn. Reuters later confirmed that the coordination phase of Genesis had taken months. Intelligence analysts had stitched together over 30 separate investigations into a single operational blueprint. ICE's CommandNet system, an AI-driven surveillance platform previously tested during border interdictions, became the nerve center. It combined license plate recognition, GPS signals, and intercepted communications into a live tactical grid. "We were fighting their system with its own tools," one Homeland Security official told BBC News. Operation Stealth was remarkable. Convoys blended with commuter traffic, drones flew at low altitude to evade public detection. Defense News reported that even participating local departments were notified only hours before the raids to prevent leaks. Within the first 90 minutes, more than 100 suspects were in custody. Arrests unfolded like clockwork. Silent entries, thermal scans, and zero crossfire. The most dramatic confrontation occurred near Lakeland, where agents stormed a compound believed to house several high-value targets. Inside, they found encrypted tablets, counterfeit IDs, and detailed maps of local schools and hospitals. "It was intelligence-grade reconnaissance," said a federal task force analyst quoted by The Guardian. "They weren't just criminals, they were planners." Sunrise, ICE teams across Osceola, Polk, and Hillsborough counties had executed simultaneous raids. Each strike hit with surgical precision, guided by live drone footage and satellite-assisted tracking. Despite the scale, there were no fatalities, civilian or otherwise, a statistic that law enforcement veterans later described as unheard of for an operation of this magnitude. Behind the scenes, the command network functioned like a digital organism. Every field unit transmitted biometric data, suspect lists, and situational updates in real time to analysts in Washington. Jane's Defense Weekly compared the system's synchronization to NATO's battlefield coordination models, calling Genesis a proof of concept for integrated homeland defense. Defense News revealed that federal analysts found encrypted group chats mapping police patrol routes, ICE checkpoints, and local event schedules. The sophistication mirrored command structures used by paramilitary groups in Latin America, particularly in Mexico and Venezuela. This was no random collection of offenders, it was a hybrid organization, criminally motivated, tactically trained, and frighteningly organized. President Donald Trump monitored the operation from the White House Situation Room. When confirmation of success arrived, his statement was concise: "The age of hiding is over." Within hours, the administration announced that 400 high-priority offenders had been detained, without casualties and with near-perfect precision. Beyond the triumph, a new strategic doctrine had quietly emerged. Genesis demonstrated that domestic enforcement could now function like a counter-terrorism strike: predictive, algorithmic, and preemptive. DW called it the Florida model of domestic warfare. Instead of reacting to crime, America had learned to anticipate it. Logistics following the arrests were formidable. ICE established temporary command and holding centers across the state, segregating detainees by criminal category and risk level. To prevent collusion, suspects were dispersed to multiple federal facilities under continuous drone surveillance. Within 48 hours, 90% had been transported to secured locations for interrogation. International observers took note. Al Jazeera English reported that foreign law enforcement agencies in Europe and Asia requested briefings on the Genesis model, viewing it as a hybrid template for tackling organized infiltration. Israel's Internal Security Division even described the operation as civilian counterinsurgency, executed with military discipline. Still, not everyone celebrated. Civil rights advocates questioned whether the digital surveillance tools used in Genesis could be turned inward against ordinary citizens. The Guardian warned that a state powerful enough to see everything may someday forget what it shouldn't look at. Now, however, the results spoke louder than theory. The operation's efficiency, precision, and total absence of loss had set a new benchmark for U.S. Homeland Enforcement. As dawnlight broke across Florida's horizon, one undeniable truth emerged from the haze. The battlefield had changed. It wasn't the border anymore. It was the neighborhood. When the news broke, 400 criminals captured in Florida ICE sweep, shock turned instantly to disbelief. For years, residents in towns like Kissimmee, Lakeland, and Tampa had waved to the same workers who now appeared in handcuffs on their television screens. Landscapers, delivery drivers, even school maintenance staff. Ordinary faces now revealed as members of a sprawling criminal web. The illusion of safety had shattered. According to Reuters, community hotlines across Florida lit up in the following days. In Orlando alone, tips about suspicious activity tripled within 72 hours. Fear had evolved into vigilance. Parents began checking school employee registries, churches formed neighborhood patrol groups, and homeowners installed door cameras at unprecedented rates. The sense of peace that once defined suburban Florida had given way to something new: cautious awareness. State and federal officials praised the transformation as a sign of resilience. Governor Ron DeSantis, flanked by Homeland Security representatives, called Operation Genesis a victory for citizen cooperation. But BBC News observed that beneath the confidence lay anxiety, a silent understanding that Florida's communities had harbored a hidden enemy for years. The myth of safety through distance, the network reported, has vanished. Psychological impact ran deep. Families who discovered that their children's school contractor or grocery delivery man was among those arrested felt a betrayal that words couldn't mend. You don't expect the danger to live across the street, one Orlando mother told The Guardian, her voice shaking. Now, we question everyone. The operation's early data stunned investigators. BBC News reported that many suspects maintained legal employment within schools, delivery companies, and municipal services. Some even worked in proximity to vulnerable populations: children, the elderly, and hospital staff. Nearly 60% had direct community access through legitimate jobs. What looked like integration was actually infiltration. ICE's post-operation data confirmed the scale of infiltration. 60 detainees lived within 1 mile of public schools. More than 100 operated out of small family-run businesses embedded in residential zones. The findings forced state legislators to draft emergency measures requiring enhanced employee background checks for schools, daycare centers, and local service providers. At the federal level, President Donald Trump praised the outcome as proof that America can protect itself without sacrificing precision. He ordered the creation of new interagency task forces modeled after Genesis, emphasizing rapid data integration between counties and federal agencies. DW reported that Florida's 287G program, the local federal partnership allowing deputies to act under ICE authority, would now serve as a national framework. Yet, the success carried unintended consequences. The Al Jazeera English Bureau noted a climate of quiet suspicion where community bonds strained under constant vigilance. Immigrant families, even those with legal status, feared profiling. Civil rights organizations warned that fear could erode trust between law enforcement and the very communities they sought to protect. Still, the public's demand for security outweighed hesitation. A YouGov America poll conducted days after the operation found that 71% of Americans supported replicating Genesis nationwide. For most, the discovery that 400 criminals had lived undetected in family neighborhoods justified even the most aggressive tactics. Meanwhile, the data collected from Florida began to ripple outward. Defense News revealed that analysts cross-referenced Genesis intelligence with investigations in Texas, Arizona, and Nevada, finding digital traces connecting suspects to ongoing cartel activity. The pattern suggested a national lattice work, localized networks operating under shared playbooks. Florida had been the first domino. Community leaders described the aftermath as both awakening and transformation. Neighborhoods once defined by politeness became defined by participation. Volunteer patrols organized nightly walks. Social media groups shared surveillance footage, and families began coordinating with local officers directly. "We're not scared anymore," said a Kissimmee resident interviewed by DW. "We're alert." Evolution was unmistakable. What began as fear had become civic mobilization, a civilian layer of defense built not on weaponry, but awareness. Still, a haunting unease lingered beneath the newfound order. If 400 offenders could embed themselves in one state, how many more waited elsewhere? And in empowering citizens to watch, had America quietly turned its neighborhoods into outposts of surveillance? Florida exhaled after the chaos, one truth remained. Peace had returned, but innocence had not. Operation Genesis did not end in Florida. It detonated across the nation like a seismic wave. Within weeks, ICE field offices in Texas, New Mexico, and Nevada initiated follow-up raids using the same tactics: synchronized warrants, AI-assisted mapping, and joint command structures. Reuters reported 182 arrests in El Paso and 97 more in Albuquerque, each connected to trafficking corridors uncovered by Genesis. The pattern was undeniable. Florida had been the prototype, not the exception. President Donald Trump seized the moment. From the White House press room, he declared, "America's neighborhoods are the new front line." The statement was not rhetorical. Under the administration's Community Security and Integrity Initiative, ICE, DHS and local law enforcement were permanently linked through real-time fusion centers. The goal? To prevent embedded criminal networks from taking root again. President Donald Trump's directive to restore law and order in every U.S. state, ICE began piecing together the network through advanced data fusion. Local incidents that once appeared unrelated, minor assaults, missing shipments, vandalism, were reclassified as symptoms of a single coordinated structure. The breakthrough came through the 287G program, a partnership empowering county officers to act with ICE authority. When local and federal data were combined, the picture grew clear and horrifying. Defense News described the policy as counter-infiltration doctrine, a fusion of military intelligence and civilian policing. Drone surveillance, predictive algorithms, and cross-jurisdiction data pooling turned law enforcement into a 24-hour detection grid. The technology once used to track terrorists abroad now watched over domestic communities. To supporters, it was evolution. To critics, it was the birth of a digital frontier where every citizen lived under quiet observation. Success metrics were staggering. DW News confirmed a 30% drop in organized crime incidents across Florida within a month of Genesis. Yet the data masked deeper implications. Civil liberties advocates warned that constant monitoring risked creating a society defined by suspicion rather than safety. The Guardian cautioned that, in conquering infiltration, America risks inviting omnipresence. Globally, Genesis became a case study. German and French interior ministries examined its methodology to counter migrant-linked criminal cells. Israeli security experts compared it to counterinsurgency operations in dense urban zones. Even Japan's National Police Agency cited Genesis as a model for multi-agency cyber coordination. The United States had exported not just enforcement tactics, but a philosophy: security as preemption. Victory revealed new vulnerabilities. The DEA confirmed that several Florida detainees had links to the Sinaloa and Jalisco New Generation cartels, proving that infiltration was no longer confined to smuggling routes. It had penetrated domestic commerce. Businesses, charities, even schools had been weaponized as logistics nodes. The battlefield isn't the border, one Pentagon strategist told The Guardian. It's the supply chain. As Washington digested the findings, a bipartisan security bloc in Congress introduced the Community Security and Integrity Act of 2025, allocating $2.5 billion for new fusion hubs and AI-driven monitoring systems. The proposal split the nation. Supporters saw protection, opponents saw potential for abuse. Still, polls by Gallup showed overwhelming public approval. Nearly 3/4 of Americans favored expanding Genesis-style operations nationwide. In the international arena, adversaries seized the narrative. Beijing accused the US of institutionalized surveillance under the flag of safety. Moscow's media called it democracy's self-inflicted surveillance state. Yet NATO allies quietly applauded. European intelligence chiefs, facing their own infiltration crises, saw Genesis as proof that democracies could adapt without collapsing into authoritarianism, if vigilance was balanced with transparency. Behind the politics, a deeper transformation unfolded. Ordinary citizens, once passive observers, now viewed security as a shared responsibility. Neighborhood watches evolved into digital reporting collectives. Homeowners used AI cameras linked directly to police networks. It was grassroots defense reborn in the digital age, a civilian firewall against invisible threats. Yet, as BBC News noted, this vigilance carried an emotional toll. Fear has been replaced by awareness, but awareness has become a kind of quiet exhaustion. Communities were safer, but never truly relaxed. The hum of drones overhead, the constant data alerts, the subtle anxiety of being both protected and observed, all of it defined America's new reality. Frontline had moved from distant borders to front yards and smartphones. The enemy was harder to see, but the cost of blindness was higher than ever. So the question lingers over every city and suburb. Can a nation remain free when security must never sleep? By the end of 2025, Operation Genesis had become more than a success story. It was a turning point in the evolution of American homeland security. The mission that began with 400 arrests in Florida had reshaped how the United States viewed its internal defense. No longer was the threat defined by borders or walls. Under President Donald Trump's direction, the nation adopted a new paradigm: homeland vigilance. DW News noted that Florida's intelligence fusion uncovered a command web hiding inside civic trust. Neighborhoods had unknowingly become operational zones. The offenders used ordinary life as camouflage, legitimate businesses to launder money, churches for communication, and community groups to recruit new members. Writers described the doctrine as a merger of counterintelligence, data analytics, and community engagement. ICE, DHS, and local police forces now operated under unified command through the National Fusion Network, a digital grid linking over 1,200 jurisdictions in real time. The aim was to anticipate threats before they materialized. Prevention is the new deterrence, President Trump declared in a televised address, calling Genesis a model for a generation of security that defends without hesitation. Defense News detailed how the network operated like a domestic version of NATO's integrated defense system. Every police report, border intercept, or suspicious transaction flowed into AI engines capable of identifying emerging patterns across states. The system, codenamed Sentinel, was designed to detect the kind of multi-layered infiltration Genesis had exposed, where crime, migration, and cartel networks overlapped beneath the radar of traditional law enforcement. Reporters hailed Sentinel as revolutionary. For the first time, America can see itself clearly, wrote DW News, praising the system's fusion of technology and law. Crime rates in several Genesis-linked counties dropped by nearly 40%, and the number of untracked re-entries by deported criminals fell to historic lows. Yet, not everyone shared the enthusiasm. The Guardian warned that the line between vigilance and surveillance had thinned to transparency's breaking point. If every citizen becomes a data point, it asked, who protects the citizen from the system? Globally, the shift resonated. Israel's intelligence community quietly praised Genesis as the civilianization of counterinsurgency. Germany, facing its own extremist infiltration, began constructing a similar interagency framework. Meanwhile, China's state media accused Washington of militarizing its own democracy, while Russia mocked the new system as the Iron Curtain turned inward. For most Americans, Genesis symbolized renewal rather than repression. Communities once paralyzed by fear now felt empowered. Neighborhood apps connected directly with local enforcement networks. Churches hosted safety briefings. Families learned to identify digital scams and suspicious patterns. It was national defense reborn at the grassroots. Still, the moral cost weighed heavily. BBC News observed that, in protecting freedom, the United States has learned to live with constant oversight. The hum of drones over Miami's suburbs, the silent sweep of surveillance balloons over Tampa Bay, the awareness that every pattern, every signal, every license plate fed into a national mosaic, all these became part of daily life. The trade-off between safety and privacy was no longer theoretical, it was routine. Washington, lawmakers debated whether Genesis should remain a model or a warning. Senator Ruth Kavanaugh of Arizona put it bluntly, if the state must see everything to stay safe, then who decides what's worth watching? Yet the results were undeniable. The US had neutralized a threat without firing a single shot. For President Trump's administration, that was victory and validation.